Before we start, a brief disclaimer. This podcast is provided for general information and discussion purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, research, or financial promotion, nor an offer or solicitation to buy or sell any securities or financial instruments in any jurisdiction. The views expressed are those of the speakers at the time of recording and may not reflect the views of any organisation they are associated with. While information discussed is believed to be reliable, no representation or warranty is given, and no liability is accepted for any loss arising from reliance on it. Listeners should seek their own independent professional advice before making any investment or financial decisions.
Yeah, so John, I thought we'd have a conversation on fund marketing in the alternative space. So there's a lot going on with regards to private assets into wealth channels. Certainly there's a lot of media attention on credit funds and lack of liquidity. So when I think about marketing, I'm always thinking about, yes, getting brand awareness, but there's also the education component, depending on the segment that people are communicating to. So I'm going to start with a really easy question, John. Do you think the marketing function's broken at the moment within the alternatives segment?
Well, I think I probably agree, but phrase it slightly differently. The thing about marketing, especially in the alternative investment industry, and that's really where my focus is, it's not that it's fundamentally broken, but just like any other attribute amongst investment firms, or any firm for that matter, performance is on a distribution. And unfortunately for the alternative investment management firm, the marketing function and quality of marketing tends to be at the wrong end. The tail is fatter at the wrong end of the curve, especially when you compare it to other industries, and even the long only industry and more retail marketing industries. So it could certainly deal with a lot of improvement, but I wouldn't say it's fundamentally broken. There's just a lot of opportunities that are being missed, and there's a lot of unfulfilled potential.
Yeah. Okay, well, why don't we back up and kind of start at just kind of the very beginning of brand with regards to what does it actually signal to LPs? What's the importance of brand before we kind of move into the other components of marketing?
Okay, so I mean, one thing that is often spoken about is the fact that brand isn't so much about identity, it's more about managing risk. And I think one of the things that managers often are guilty of...
Sorry, can you define risk? What do you mean by risk?
Well, this comes down to how LPs, how investors think about the funds they invest in.
Yeah.
So whereas an investment manager is remunerated very, very much on their performance, so whether they take the right types of risks in the market to deliver outperformance, generate alpha ahead of what the market's doing. When it comes to allocators, the same isn't really true. They're not really motivated and incentivized to take on a huge amount of risk. It's not performance really that determines their take home and their bonus at the end of the year. If it is performance, it tends to be spread across the entire firm. So it's very unlikely that an allocator will get rich from picking a stellar fund.
Yeah.
So it's a different type of motivation. So think of it more as a defensive position. How can I pick the right funds that will do enough so that my portion of the portfolio still looks good at the end of the year for the review and I don't get fired?
Yeah.
So it's more about that than how can I pick the very best funds and deliver the greatest possible returns from my segment of the portfolio to the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
Because often, even if their own money is tied up in the business, it's going to be insignificant compared to the rest of the stuff that's happening.
So when you talk about brand, so I look at lots of podcasts out, which is a kind of a component of firms, yes, getting brand awareness. There's education components to it. So everyone seems to be on with the focus of communicating to the market. But are you saying that if I'm an allocator, an LP, that actually, I won't get fired, as they'd say, by buying IBM, even though probably not the best product. Is that the risk you're talking about to the LP of their career path?
100%.
Yeah.
It's, nobody got fired for buying IBM.
Yeah.
However, a young gentleman called Mr. Wang came into the American market many, many years ago.
I haven't heard of Wang in a long time.
I mean, that's a long time ago, right? And he managed to grab a huge amount of market share by doing things differently.
Yeah.
And the same could be said about Michael Dell,
Yeah.
who built a huge and very successful business to this day by approaching the market differently. So it's not simply you have to be just thinking about the defensive angle. What I'm trying to say is that it's not enough to just be like people and be defensive. You have to stand out. You have to give people a reason to pick you. So if you want somebody to take, when we talk about risk, I'm talking about career risk, really, from an allocator's perspective. If you expect somebody to essentially take a risk with their career on becoming a champion for your fund, it's not enough for an allocator to say, I quite like this fund. These are processes that can take 3, 6, 12 months, sometimes even longer.
Yeah.
You need a champion within the allocation team to be pushing for an allocation to your fund throughout that long process. So they need to be very excited about the prospect of working with you.
Yeah.
So that means communicating to the allocator exactly what it is that you offer that they cannot get elsewhere.
Yeah.
So trying to be Temu KKR is not an effective marketing strategy.
Yeah. So on that point, because it's quite different. So if I look at an allocator, and you talked about career risk, obviously in liquid markets, where you're getting judged every day on what fund did I pick, because it's mark to market every day. In alternatives, where it's not liquid generally, right? Over extended durations, used to be 7 years, now things get pushed out to 10 years because of the lack of liquidity. The allocator is really not going to be judged. They'll probably not be the same firm for that long. So can you talk about that a little bit? Are they getting, and there's no kind of, even yearly benchmarking. So what do you mean by career risk in that sense?
Well, I mean, alternative funds, those in the private markets, closed-ended funds, they don't mark to market as frequently as other funds do, but they mark to aspiration or whatever else you want to call it.
Yeah.
So there's a few different things to unpack there. So let's start with the fact that private markets, closed-ended vehicles tend to be very long duration investments compared, very low liquidity, ignoring the secondary markets.
Yeah.
How do you then position your fund and your firm as something that remains interesting and relevant as perhaps those analysts cycle through and move to different institutions? And probably the best way to think about how to address that is through creating a series of stories and ideas that are all part of brand.
Yeah.
And brand is, and I can't believe I'm still saying this in 2026, but brand is more than your logo, your colors, your fonts, all of that sort of thing. It's how people feel about you when you're not there, how they react to you, and how they think about you, really. So creating a cohesive set of messages, ideas, concepts that stick. So that's the essential thing. These things have got to stick around. Yeah. And we can break that down if you'd like sort of some advice into how to get that to happen.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of components to it. One is, can we say, who are we talking about when we say brand? So there's the firm brand, then there's the individual GP manager, the fund brand, and same thing on the LP side, right? So I'm Ontario Teachers Pension Fund. That's a good brand, serving their beneficial owners. Then there's the decision maker within, or the analysts. So how do you look at kind of, and let's just keep on the GP side to make it kind of clear. A firm's brand versus, the star manager brand. And that was always a big thing in long-only liquid markets, right? Bill Gross, right?
Pre-Woodford.
Pre-Woodford,
Look, I mean, that's a really interesting question. And it's something that people are starting to explore in terms of LinkedIn is an obvious place where people are getting involved in that. But I think that there's something I used to hear a lot, and that was firms talking about key person risk.
Yeah.
Now, if you are an institutional behemoth, if you're an industry titan, if you have 50 offices around the world, multiple tens of thousands of staff, huge embedded processes, etc., then key person risk is not a really important consideration compared to the boutique or emerging asset manager.
Yeah.
And whereas I used to find firms, and probably still to this day, they still try and do this. They understand the concept of key person risk and they want to mitigate for it because they think that marketing is a risk mitigation exercise, and it absolutely isn't. And this is probably we'll probably come to this later, but one of the biggest mistakes I see firms making around alternative investments is being too defensive with their marketing. They're seeing it purely as a risk aversion exercise. I know we talked about career risk and so on, but it's not just about removing risk. You can't remove all the risk. You have to give them a reason to believe, something that gets them excited, makes them want to commit, makes them emotionally connected. Yeah. And one of the great ways to do that is with a star manager. Yeah. So some funds that have this great expertise that could be concentrated in a single individual or a small part of a team, my advice is to not try and shy away from that, because at the end of the day, everybody knows that if, God forbid, that manager gets hit by a bus, everybody's redeeming. It doesn't matter how much you talk about the fact that key person risk has been mitigated. We're trying to no, your special sauce, the thing that is great about you, in reality, is likely the trading instinct, the processes, the connections, the relationships of this star individual or individuals. Yeah. That is what makes you investable. Yeah. So stop trying to pull away from that and actually lean into it. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a contingency. You shouldn't have plans for what happens after they leave, but that isn't a day one question. Yeah. It really means you just need to think about what's your middle bench like. Yeah. Who do you have coming up in the next few years? So look at that. Some of this, not to be negative, seems to me quite a bit of institutional theater. There is, a lot of the decks I look at look the same. There doesn't seem to be that much differentiation. And obviously you look at the stats, where the capital flow to, the biggest managers of the biggest brands are attracting most of the capital. So can you talk a little bit about, how would I put it, perception versus facts in kind of the marketing engagement to the target LPs? Sure. I mean, there's two things here, I think. Yeah. There's the fact that everything looks the same. Yeah. And maybe I'll come on to that next, but just to deal with the facts thing, and a lot of this actually comes down to when we're talking about presentations specifically, how presentations are built. Yeah. And one way that I like to describe this process, and it sounds ridiculous, but this is what happens, is that when the poor marketing person decides they're going to write a new deck, they have a little barrel and they put the 3 important apples in there they want to give to LPs, and they walk around the office and somebody from risk throws a few more apples in there and says, hey, look, we have institutional processes. Yeah. We have a risk committee. We just spent X tens of thousands on this flashy new risk system, on this EMS, this OMS, this all these different systems. Somebody from HR comes in and says, okay, look, we've got this stuff on the legal side as well, in terms of the fact that we don't have any lawsuits against us. We've got small turnaround, a low turnover of staff. We've got this, that, the other. Everybody wants to get involved. Everybody wants to contribute. Yeah. And what ends up happening is you have a barrel that is full to the brim with apples. And then what happens is the salespeople struggle with this 80-slide deck, this barrel full of apples. They turn up to the office of somebody often on the other side of the world that they've only ever spoken to via email before. They shake their hand. They both sit down, they reach into their bag, they lift this enormous barrel up over their heads and then just dump it all over the LP. and then the LP doesn't know what to do. They're just covered in apples. They don't know which ones are important, and all they're thinking about is, I really wish the fire alarm would go off right now. How do I get out of here?
So does this get into, and we'll get into kind of segmentation because it matters on what type of manager we're talking about, emerging versus established.
Yeah.
Can you talk about kind of the broken telephone on storytelling? And that's a very good example of this. People in the same organization aren't telling the same story to the market or even to the same client.
Yeah.
Part of it because maybe that's a symptom of, well, I'm having to create a story out of all these apples I'm finding, and that what's going to resonate. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this comes to well before the presentation is put together. So people often just turn to the marketing department or the IR team, which incorporates the marketing department typically, and just say, look, we need a deck for this trip.
Yeah.
What doesn't happen is that the team gets together and starts thinking about what are the reasons why somebody should actually want to invest with us.
Yeah.
What are the things that are different about us compared to other funds in the market? And often, you'd speak to managers and you say to them, why should somebody invest with you? And the answers that come back are because we've got the best people.
Yeah.
We've got the best team. We've got the best processes. We've got something which is called proprietary deal origination. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it sounds pretty exciting.
I've heard a lot. Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard it a few times. Right, so everybody is talking about the same things, and that's the starting point for the original thing. Why does everything look the same?
Yeah,
right. So they're not spending the time actually thinking about why somebody should invest with them instead of somebody else. It's very different talking about things that differentiate you than saying you're better. If I come in and say I'm better, I've got an identical twin brother.
Yeah,
and if I come in and say to you, I'm a better Sudoku player than my twin brother, you'll probably say, well, I am. I'm telling you, I'm a better Sudoku player than my identical twin brother.
Yeah.
I can see you're skeptical, sir. Right? If I come in and say, you know what I've been doing for the past 2 months? I've been on an island in the Orkneys with my personal Sudoku trainer, and I've been running through and developing a brand new system that explains how to quickly assess and manipulate the Sudoku grid in order to get a faster and more accurate response and to create the puzzles quicker. And that's why actually you'll find that I'm a better Sudoku player than my identical twin brother.
Yeah.
Now that's far more convincing. I'm saying the same thing, but what I'm focusing on, instead of the I'm better, it's why I'm better.
Yeah.
So when managers say they've got proprietary deal origination, for example...
Is this part of their capital formation processes?
Exactly. But what is it about those that's interesting? What's different?
Yeah.
What is it that when somebody goes back to their firm, when Janet goes back to meet with the allocation committee at the large investor, and the CIO says, Janet, what have you got for us today? You want Janet to say, well, I've seen 5 or 6 funds over the past week that were interesting, but particularly of interest, I think, is this firm because they do this thing differently. So it's something that they can only get from you. So when you talk about the things that you do in a way that expresses them as a unique quality that somebody can only buy from you, you are removing options from the table. The question is, do you want to be a choice of one or a choice of one of 1,000 if you're a long-short equity fund, for example?
So that moves into, let's focus on emerging managers for a little bit. Because obviously, I mean, it's tough, right? Raising capital either for the first time or it might be your second fund, but you're still small. And do you want to look like you've institutionalized your business? Can you talk about, like, what's the biggest mistake emerging managers make? Or pick 3. It's probably
I mean, there's one big one which virtually every emerging manager aspires to making, really, and often they do it very, very successfully, and that is to ape the industry titans. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, nobody wants to buy Temu KKR, yet many people are busy in their marketing departments trying to demonstrate that they are just that. So I think of this a little bit like you've heard of the cargo cults. There's obviously the famous one with the old Duke of Edinburgh in Micronesia. There's another one called the Cult of John Frum, and that's in a small island called Tanna in Vanuatu, also in Micronesia. And in the later stages of the Second World War, lots of American servicemen and service people were based there. The islanders thought this was rather weird because they spent their entire days hunting, fishing, the men did at least, hunting and fishing in order to deliver enough food to feed their families. And what were the Americans doing? They were dancing around, they were putting headphones on, and instead of starving, which is what they thought should be happening, every now and again, and quite regularly actually, planes would land and drop off food and supplies. And these people were well fed, happy, healthy, very well looked after. That was interpreted by the islanders as a religion, and they believed that if they carried out the same practices that these American Air Force and naval men did, they would be rewarded by this god John Frum in exactly the same way. And John Frum, by the way, current thinking is that it just means John From. Yeah, John from America. And the character John From is dressed up. It's a village elder who's dressed up with a big hat and medals and this whole regalia.
It's like you on the weekend.
It's like in the weekend, yeah. And the rest of the people there on the island, they dress up and they take their shirts off. They write USA on their chest in big red letters. They have bamboo poles and wood for rifles. They march around. There's a lot of ceremony. And then beyond that, they build the most incredible edifices I think I've ever seen. And so you think wooden radar arrays, wooden control towers. They build clear runways. They build wooden planes. Yeah. And yet, after the American service people left, not a single cargo plane landed. Yeah. And what they were doing is copying the wrong thing. Yeah. So they were looking at what was happening, assessing it through their understanding of how the world works, assumed this was a deity that was coming down. If they worshipped the deity just like the Americans did, they would be rewarded with cargo. Yeah, that's what a lot of emerging managers do, and actually some more established ones too. They look at what the very successful, very large managers do, the BlackRocks, the Blackstones, and I'm not saying there aren't important lessons to be learnt from these firms. Yeah, but those lessons are typically in terms of process and quality of thinking and rigorous approach to following what they say they're going to do and keeping promises. Yeah, when they actually try and copy the branding, the brand image, the messaging, when they fill the first 5 to 10 slides of their deck with the people, their offices, and actually they've got 5 people, they've got an advisory board of 12 who they've never met. They've got 3 offices, 2 of which are on beach huts somewhere, remote working. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I think I always look at emerging managers have the benefit of being able to, first of all, brand individual, right? Yeah. Of being the smartest person in the room. Be able to talk to an LP and they feel that they found a unique golden nugget that no one else has. And people leaning into that if they are indeed very smart and the smartest person in the room. Yeah. And then if we move into kind of mid-sized managers and their business model, and they might be a bit stuck. So in long-only space, we'd say, great, index funds, BlackRock, State Street, they do more than just indexing, but that's the majority of their assets. Great, asset gatherers just keep on swooping it in through marketing channels. You have small emerging managers, great, I found someone who's managing $1 billion, and it is all about performance, and they're not trying to asset gather, they're trying to do a good job for their clients, and they have really good performance. Then you have ones that are stuck in the middle, might be 50 billion to 70 billion. We kind of know who the usual suspects are, and they've kind of done acquisitions and kind of stuck. None of their funds are great, right? And they're a bit of a muddle, right? What do you do? In the alternative space, what do you see with regards to, when I say mid-size, let's say 2 to 10 billion managers, that's still small, but fairly mid-size in the relative size of the market. Why do they tend to be undistinguishable? Is it that where brand matters the most? Like, how do you approach it differently for those? So you're not big, right? You're not small. You're in the middle.
It's sort of difficult second album. Yeah. Right. So often, if you're in the alternative space and your strategy has enough capacity, you've probably done that with one fund or one idea or one concept in the market. You get to that sort of 2 billion size, and I always think, you get to 500 million as most strategies, most hedge fund strategies, at least most more liquid strategies. All you've done really is prove that the strategy works. You haven't really done much more than that. When you get into that sort of 1 to 2 billion size, as an individual fund, you can start looking at much larger ticket allocations. You're in that sort of 500, maybe to 200 million for some investors. So you're accessing a larger investor, which means typically a more sophisticated investor, probably with more specialist teams. So the way that you talk about your business can become more sophisticated. But I want to sound alarm here, and again, a mistake I see a lot of managers, virtually every manager, make, actually, and it's this, as you said, the smartest person in the room, this desire to be the most intelligent person in the room, which therefore that's where the money flows to the brains. Now, that may be true, and certainly it's a factor, but the way that most people try and demonstrate this actually is having the opposite effect. So often managers will talk in very obscure, obtuse, completely technical language because they think it makes them sound smart.
Oh, can we do some bullshit bingo?
Yeah,
sorry to interrupt. What are the 3 catchphrases that drive you nuts or make you laugh? I mean, the industry's full of jargon.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It even starts with, the most simple one, the first one which got me excited about this topic, if that's the right word, was the fact that companies issue debt rather than borrow money.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the start of it.
Yeah.
And as soon as people start obscuring things, I start thinking there's something to hide here.
Yeah.
Proprietary deal origination is
that's a classic.
Is another classic. I'm sure you've heard lots of portable alpha was a good one as well. But
sorry, I digress.
Yeah.
Carry on.
But the thing about managers and the way they talk is that they want to use this technical language so they think it makes them sound like an expert.
Yeah.
But if you really want to sound like an expert, talk like a 10-year-old.
Yeah, it's taking things that are complex and making them simple. Yeah. That's intelligence, not the opposite.
Exactly. Only somebody that can explain a complicated topic in simple terms really understands it.
Yeah.
And I often find that when I'm talking to managers, if I keep asking them questions, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? We come to a realization that this is a term that they first heard 20 years ago and have been using appropriately in their mind ever since, but they've never really truly understood the fundamental principles of how it was built and what it really, really means. And because of that, you have words which change sense and change meaning over time. So keep your language simple, explain to people what you do that is so complicated in such a way that they can understand it. That's the first thing. So it makes you sound intelligent. But then actually beyond that, there's some even more important reasons why you should want to do it in simple terms. Because you need that story to be repeated. It's one thing impressing an individual in a room, but that individual then has to carry the torch for you within their organization, especially when you're looking at larger allocations. These are long processes involving lots of people who have multiple distractions. Investor attention is one of the most valuable commodities for anybody looking to raise capital at any point throughout the entire process. How do you keep attention? If you can tell engaging stories about what you do and why it is so special the way that you do it, then you're already ahead of 95 probably % of managers. And certainly virtually every manager that I speak to gets this wrong. They want to be complicated. They want to sound smart. They think that makes them look good to LPs, but all it does is confuse them. And when LPs are confused, that doesn't make them want to take a risk on you. It doesn't want them to take, so coming back to that career risk concept, they're not wanting to take that career risk. So explain to them in simple, emotive language what is so special about what you do, and actually use the language of other investors. So one big tip that I would say is absolutely critical for these mid-sized managers is to build a better understanding of what your investors really think about you.
Yeah.
And that's difficult.
So that's interesting because you mentioned it. It's one thing to a large institutional manager that do actually get to meet. There's no kind of intermediary per se. Yes, they have their investment committees, internal socialization. So that's hard enough. If you look, and it's being specific to private assets, but it flows to other asset classes as well. But specifically into private assets, into the retail channel, let's say wealth channel, right? Whether it's private banks, wealth channel, where there are advisors to hold the hand of the underlying beneficial owner, Mr. and Mrs. Smith per se. And again, these products coming through, evergreen funds, whatever that means, semi-liquid, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And so then you get into the education component. So when you're trying to tell your story, but then through these channels who don't, they're bamboozled by all this marketing language, which doesn't mean anything. And that education component, what about building your brand of being, the market educator, or at least coming across as someone who really cares about communicating what's really going on? And then within that context, now here's my strategy. Are you seeing people looking at that at all? I know some of the bigger houses like KKR and whatnot, they do lots of podcasts and they're trying. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah. If you're a smaller manager, you have the benefit of having larger managers who are going to do a lot of that work for you.
Yeah.
So that on the terms of the basis of the strategy, the asset class, I think let them go to town, let them spend millions educating the wealth management sector about what private debt is. Yeah. Actually, don't let them do that because the way they've been doing it, I think is not great. Let's put it that way, right? It's not entirely fully honest, I think, and transparent. But get them to do the hard work and then come in and then explain why you act differently than them in that market. What it is about you that is different to the other players. Yeah. And that's what it always comes down to. How do you separate yourself from the pack and say, this is what I offer? And you may not want that, and that's absolutely fine. But you don't need 100% of investors you talk to invest in your fund. You wouldn't have capacity, frankly. And it's nice to be oversubscribed, but it's better to hit your targets with investors who truly understand what you do, because when things don't go well, they're far more likely to understand why they're not going well, because you explained your strategy in an honest manner and explained very clearly the market conditions under which you might have softer performance for a period, or some assets or some investments might not go entirely to plan. And the thing that some research I saw from, this is 15, 20 years ago now, when wealth managers were trying to understand why their end investors fired fund managers from their portfolios, it came down to not performance, it was communication around performance. Yep. So think of an investor, they don't want a surprise. So if you have some information about performance that you perceive is not going to be great, perhaps over the next couple of months, it's unlikely they're going to redeem. Yeah. And in some asset classes, they can't.
Well, the problem is, one is you can do that, but fundamentally, you've just been marketing to the wrong investor type because of psychology. And you can say, listen, it'll be up and down. These drawdowns can happen, right? Don't look at it, put it away for 10 years. But they don't have the psychology for that. They may say so when they first allocate. Yeah. Then something goes wrong, like, oh, no, I want my money back. That's just, right?
Yeah, and you can't prevent that from happening. But you can get ahead of it, and you can mitigate the risk to you as a manager of those capital outflows.
So what's the most, two more questions, I think. What are the two most overrated things in marketing? Sorry for the technical term, things, but where is it relied on too much? I think marketing will deal with that. Or
I think what people spend too much time doing is focusing on themselves, and it comes down to something which we think of as in marketing language as orientation. So how are you oriented as an organization. And most managers like to think that they're customer focused and customer centric because they read a paper by McKinsey in, I think, 2014, which spoke about how important being customer centric is in financial services.
Yeah.
So there are whole swathes of financial businesses, from retail banks through to alternative investment managers, invested in building client-centric processes.
Yeah, client first
approach. There are businesses, there are job titles. I've seen it firsthand, and it doesn't work if it's just an idea and a strategy which isn't actually embedded through values and through constant work. So they talk about being customer-centric, and then they don't speak to their customers. So how can you position yourself and find out who your most likely next investor is? And the simple answer to that is speak to your current investors, understand what it is that binds them together, and most likely your next group of investors will come from a very similar group, whether that's demographics, geography, approach to risk, all sorts of different things, previous investments, previous institutions even. Those are things that you should be looking at. And there are other benefits as well, which are almost even more important, and that is understanding the language of the investor. So we're talking about how to sound smart. You want to be the smartest person in the room, but also you want to be the person that gets the investor. If an investor walks out of a meeting with a manager, especially these mid-size or boutique managers, where you can have that one-to-one, when the investor walks out, you know what, that PM, they really understood me and what I'm trying to do. They get me. That helps you build trust. And for emerging managers where you don't have a track record, anything you can do as well that builds trust is incredibly valuable.
I see this all the time, specifically financial services. No one asks the investor about their life with regards to how they look at risk. Where are you currently looking to allocate? What problems have you had in the past, right? It's all, here's my product, here's how great it is. And they have no idea if this actually fits into their portfolio.
Yeah, but they speak about it in a very customer-centric manner, because they're speaking
they're client-centric.
To the customer,
exactly.
to the client. They're speaking directly, centrically oriented towards them. But this is what it is.
Yeah.
So if you genuinely care about your customers, if you meet someone, an old friend you haven't seen in years, you genuinely care about them. You don't start the conversation with, that's how you start. How are things? How are you? And you're
any stories on things that's blown up before, or what do you like, not like?
You want to find out from these investors what problem you're solving for them. And very few managers think about that. They think, I'm a brilliant manager, I can generate alpha, and therefore investors will want to buy my alpha generating capability. And it's a promise of alpha generation. It's not a guarantee, and that's something that managers forget. So importantly, they need to present themselves as somebody who understands the specific problems that an investor may have, or a type of investor may have, and how their product, how their type of alpha, how their specific risk return profile meets those criteria or can benefit their overall portfolio. I mean, managers, especially in the hedge fund, I find this in the hedge fund space, they walk around as if an investor will invest all of their hedge fund money with this one hedge fund manager because they're the best one. Like no trader would ever do that, right? You would spread your risk across a bunch of trades that you think are going to give you the best, Dalio kind of.
But this is where the products also get in the way. I'll go back to the Evergreens fund. I mean, I think it's a bit ridiculous from a perspective of, don't get me wrong, there's utility to it to sophisticated investors, and it has its uses. But if I'm an investor and I have an asset allocation and I have 50% long only U.S. equities, that's my liquidity bucket, or my cash, that's my liquidity bucket, and they all have different profiles. And I'll do a duration of 10 years with this 5% or 20%, and I expect it's 10 years. Not actually, I'm going to take my private assets that don't have liquidity and add liquidity to them. Right. Well, you're already doing that with the rest of your portfolio.
Yeah.
So why are you kind of bastardizing?
It doesn't. Yeah.
It doesn't. But it's against sorry, but the marketing angle. It is a mechanism to sell into a channel where they're not comfortable. I'm talking about on the wealth side. Again, the institutional side, evergreens do have utility with regards to be able to accept more money, so on and so forth. So it's a little different. But on the wealth channel, it's
I find it troubling.
Yeah.
I don't think at any point somebody should be saying to a property, a credit, debt, property, real estate fund.
Yeah.
Listen, as well as finding the right properties, developing them, and so on, investing, could you also manage my cash?
Yeah.
I think you'd probably be good at managing my cash.
Yeah.
They're completely different assets.
Yeah.
Completely different skill sets.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't want my real estate managers managing my. I want them focused on managing the real estate.
Otherwise, it's going to be a performance drag.
That's what exactly. That's what I'm paying them to do.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be paying 2 and 20
Yeah.
on US government treasuries.
Yeah.
You know, being short duration. Why would I be doing that? That's really affecting my overall return.
Yeah.
I want to take that degree of liquidity and hold that and manage that myself. And most large institutional investors are very adequate at doing that.
Yeah. And but this is where, as an industry, and I'll ask you one more question in a second. It's very hard for LPs and beneficial owners in some segments to really get clarity on what I'm being told, right? This is John Manager saying this, meaning I'll educate in this part of the market. Here's my strategy within it. The industry as a whole coming up with their buzz terms, marking different stories, that gets confusing, right? We don't really help ourselves on just clarity on some of these structures. It's very sales-led. It's very
Yeah. I mean, most asset managers are what I would call sales-oriented.
Yeah.
You know, the marketing function, which
whilst also being client-centric, though.
Well, obviously they're client-centric, but the reality is that they're sales-oriented, whether they like it or not, and they don't realise it.
Yeah.
But really, what that feels like, and an easy way to find out if you really are a sales-oriented organisation, rather client-centric or marketing-oriented or product-oriented or anything else, is if you have a conversation with your marketing team, which is go and help the sales team do this.
Yeah.
That's all that's being thought. The marketing team, all they do is support the sales team. They'll generate materials for the sales team to use.
Yeah.
They won't have a separate function, separate strategic or even tactical functions that actually support that process and achieve something different.
Yeah, it's more like operational support to the sales process.
Yeah. It's sort of sales enablement rather than actual marketing.
Yeah.
And the brand element, which can be so powerful when it comes to these long drawn out sales processes. You're never in the room when somebody makes an allocation decision about your fund.
Yeah.
But your brand can be.
Yeah.
And if you have a strong brand and you're front of mind and you create the right emotional attachments between the thought of your business and an allocation, then that can often win the day.
Yeah.
Nobody's choosing a fund based on, a single basis point difference in risk-adjusted return over the previous 5 years. So that would be nonsense, right? So how are they making those decisions? It's based on how they feel about the brand. It's how human beings, and investors are human, we shouldn't forget that. It's how they make decisions. Yeah. There is a gut response, an emotional response, a sense of what the right answer is. And then what we do is we backfill that with the data that we cherry pick to support that notion. Yeah. Because we don't like to be wrong as individuals.
All right, John, final question. What question haven't I asked that you think we should be talking about? Like what topic? Is there anything that you think is pertinent today?
Yeah, and that's a good question. The one thing that I wished managers would do more of, and that's small, medium, but particularly the mid-sized managers, this 2 to 10 billion space. And that is, how do they find out what to do next? Yeah. And often it's based on the charismatic leader of the firm who had a brilliant idea, 20 to 30 years ago, often, has built up the business, and that logic, those concepts, those ideas of how capital is raised and how clients are serviced are no longer valid, unfortunately. You know, the information advantage is flipped. It used to be that GPs held all the cards. They knew the investors. They were difficult to find. If you could find the right manager as an LP, you were lucky. And then if you could invest with them, you convince them you could invest with them, you were even luckier. And you'd be happy to pay your 2 and 20 or 3 and 30, as it used to be in some cases. Now that information advantage is flipped. An LP can discover so much information about any GP anywhere in the world from the comfort of their living room in their boxer
People always forget that. You walk in a room, the LP already knows a ton about you.
They've already formed a strong opinion in most cases. This is really one of the fundamental reasons why marketing is so powerful. It's an opportunity to control what that perception is before you meet them. If you walk into a room and the manager hasn't invested in that, and the LP is like, here comes another bloody UK long short equity manager, they're all the same, blah blah blah, they're not going to be paying attention. They're thinking about their next meeting or what they're going to have for lunch. If instead you've spent the time educating them over the past few weeks, hopefully months, and maybe even better years, as to what it is special about your approach, what dislocations or inefficiencies you focus on finding in specific markets, and how, although there are 5 different ways of making money from those types of dislocations, there is one specific way which you think is the most efficient from a capital and risk perspective way of doing it, of expressing that view in the market, and that they have the skills to be able to do that better than anybody else, then that is something very different to walk into a room, and an LP will understand and want to find out what this special thing that you do. Tell me, how do you these views that you have? How do you express them? How is that different to the way that other managers do?
That is another one I do love. How do you express your view in the market?
Yeah.
I like it though. Listen, John, thanks for your time. Now, birthday boy, you have a big one coming up, don't you?
I do. I'll be 21 years old again for the 29th time. In a couple of weeks. Yes, looking forward to that.
We'll be buying you a pint. So good chat, John, and we'll speak again soon.
Great. Thanks a lot, Blair. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.